Hey, so this is Longsword and we're going to talk about two different synthetic longswords today.
Just so we could keep it fresh on our minds, we went ahead and had a little bit of light battling before we gave this review. Right now we're using the Red Dragon Armory synthetic longswords. You can see as we use them there's a little bit of flex in the blade, more so than on a steel sword, but they're pretty light and they maneuver pretty well. They more or less operate like a real sword, and one of my favorite points that I bring up later in this review is that they are very flexible, so it hurts a lot less when you get stabbed with them. Here we're using the Purpleheart Armory Type 3 Pentii Longsword. These are the 47-inch versions, so these are really nice. They're a bit more rigid, so binds and beats are better. They are stiffer on the thrust. We talk about it later. More or less operate like a normal sword. They are a bit heavier than the Red Dragon ones, and overall just hit a bit harder, but it's not a big issue. I feel like these are a little bit more comparable to a steel longsword than the Red Dragon ones. Here we're using Purpleheart Armory's Fiore Tournament Fetter Rev A. I like this a lot because it doesn't have a shield, so I can do all the techniques I like on it. This is a steel sword and handles as such. A little bit lighter because it is a fetter, but overall it works really well. I like the long handle so that you can use the special Spezz gauntlet protection and you don't feel like you're running out of room to use the leverage action on the sword.
So first we've got Red Dragon Armory synthetic longsword. This one is the first synthetic longsword that I ever started using. I've had this for about 2 years and it's held up pretty well. There's a little bit of minor deterioration at the tip, a little bit of unlaminating, but nothing really bad. I'll talk about this one first. I like this one a lot. It's very flexible. It's more flexible than steel. It's light. It's got thick, rounded edges and a rounded tip. The reason I like this one a lot is because on the stab, it gives really easy and it doesn't hurt that much. And I found that I can use light hand protection and it doesn't hurt to get hit with. So we were using these gloves to fence with this. And I'll talk about this in a minute. So the cool thing about this longsword is that it comes apart all the way. It has a detachable pommel. Let me see if I can get this off. It's got a kind of a rubbery grip here. It's got a detachable crossguard, and then I'll show you this. It has a steel core that runs about to the middle of the blade, I think. I mean, I don't know exactly where it stops, but it's in there. It keeps it pretty rigid. It does lose rigidity on the last third of the blade, which can make it kind of hard to control during binds and things like that, but it's not a huge deal. I also use this a lot for stage combat training. So instead of buying an entire armory full of steel longswords to use on my students, I find that these are a good substitute for just everyday training. They're also really indestructible, take almost no maintenance. One of the issues you will have with these is they'll slightly warp if they get warm and are laid like this or whatever. But if you set them flat on the ground, kind of like carpeting, but anything will work, or you hang them like this, they should go back to normal pretty quickly. So that's the Red Dragon Armory synthetic longsword. You can usually find these on Amazon, somewhere between $65 and $85. They're also on Purpleheart Armory's website. The next thing we have is the Purpleheart Armory Pentii longsword. Type, I think it's 3, it could be 4, I don't remember. It's the one that's on there. This is really a nice longsword. It has steel furniture here and here, so I mean this is actually aluminum I think, and this one is steel. Really durable, slightly more maintenance in that this could rust. This whole thing is a synthetic construction. I don't know what exactly it is. It doesn't have quite the flex, but it does have some flex. It's firmer on the stab, but not so much that I found I was getting hurt on it. If you are a little bit more sensitive and you don't like getting stabbed, this one might be a bit much for you, so I would suggest a chest protector. It has really thick edges, you can see here. They're really thick and flat, though this is a heavier sword, so it has more oomph when it hits. Now, I didn't talk about the balance point on the other one, I'll bring it back up. The balance point on this is pretty close to the handle, which is interesting. I've often fenced with swords that are a little bit further out, like this one's a bit further out, but this isn't bad, it's just kind of a personal preference thing. It's counterweighted with the steel pommel, so it's got a really nice feeling in your hand. Because it's more rigid, it's easier to do binds and things on. If I had to say which one I preferred more for fencing, it's tough. For me, I've got a pretty high pain tolerance, so this is nice. I'm not finding that I'm getting hurt by it, and the extra rigidity is nice for binds and other things. This is also fine. I fenced with it for 2 years. I've never had really any complaints with it. It's a good, cheaper alternative. This comes in somewhere just north of $100 plus shipping. So I think I got it for $130 or something after shipping. This one is, like I said, $65 to $85, depending on where you can find them. They're both comparable, but very different in their construction. Now let's talk about the gear we use when we're fencing with these. So I was comfortable fencing with both of these synthetics with this. But, and I've never had this happen with, these are Purpleheart Armory gloves as well. Give me the glove. Give me the glove. These are Purpleheart Armory gloves as well, and generally they're pretty solid, but I had it split here from the Pentii longsword. Now, sometimes, I think these are recommended, they call them the single stick or rapier gloves, but I've never had a problem fencing with these, with even steel longswords. I've had one rip one time. The leather's fine, it's the stitching, so I'm gonna have to go back in and restitch this, which is kind of annoying. But that happened with this longsword. So just a note, some people will find that this hurts a little bit too much to get hit in the hand with, so they would recommend a set of these. Show the ladies and gentlemen the glove. These Lobster Spezz gauntlets. These are nice. They've got a really hard shell on the outside. It's covered all the way. You're not gonna break them. We did, before we got the tips, the rubber tips for these, we were actually using a different sword that had a rolled tip, but we had one of these gloves and the leather on the backside ripped a little bit, but I just sewed it back together. So if you're kind of crafty, it's not a big deal. Yeah, here's this one, it's right here. Like, I can sew this back together, the glove's fine, it's not ruined, it's just gonna be a pain to get it inside out and sew it. Comparing these two to a steel longsword, so this is a Fury Fetter from Purpleheart Armory. It's one of their in-house ones that they get from Smith that they have, I think, that works with them. I love this. One of my favorite parts about this is the width of the hilt, because when you're using this, I do use these, I don't use my other gloves, and they're so big, they take up a lot of the hilt. So when we're using these, I'll put it on, I guess, thank you. When we're using these, it takes up so much of the hilt that I can't fit another one on a normal sized hilt, but with this, I have enough room here that I can still use my leverage action. Thank you, sir. So this hilt is about the same as this, slightly shorter. So if you're trying to go 1-for-1 for something like this, I would do that. This hilt is slightly shorter than the other one, though the blade, interestingly enough, is longer. The Pentii blade is about in line with the Fury Fetter. So that's two different synthetic longswords, and comparing them to a steel longsword. I like all of them. It depends on what you want them for. One more recap. This one is better for fencing, if you've got a little bit of a higher pain tolerance or heavier duty gear. This one is a good hybrid for stage combat and fencing, and this is kind of the steel one that I'm comparing them to.
If you found this review helpful, please consider supporting us on Patreon so we can keep doing these reviews in the future.